In JavaScript interview series, question number 2 and 3 are pretty similar, so I'm not going to discuss about them individually. I'm just going to include both of the question in this single video. So the question is, explain the difference between var, let and const, and what is hoisting, why does var behave differently than let and const. So let's now discuss about them. So var, let and const are three ways by which we can declare a variable in JavaScript. Let's say that we are developing a game, and when we are developing a game, then we need to keep track of the scores, level, player name, rankings, etc. We can have different use cases of using different scenarios, right? So we can create variables. I can say a score, but for that we'll have to use the JavaScript keyword through which the JavaScript engine can identify this name as a variable. So here we are going to say, hey JavaScript engine, this is a variable. We have said var. So using var keyword, we converted this score text into a variable, and now we can assign it a value. So initially our score is 0. Now the variables created using the var keyword can be updated later down the line. So here if you say console.log a score, you see you get 0. But now if you say a score equals to a score plus 1, and now if you try to print a score, now you will see that the score will be 1. And similarly if you again do this, now the score will be 2. Okay, so variables created using the var keyword can be updated, can be mutated, updated or mutated, both means same. Okay, now similarly a variable created using the let keyword can also be updated. So I can say initial level equals to 0, and then here I can say initial level. You see initial level is 0, but here I can say initial level equals to initial level plus 1. So if someone wins the game, then we can update the level to level 2. Currently the level is 0, but when someone wins the initial game, the starting game, then we can update their level, and we can update their level to a rather more difficult level. Okay, so now the level will be 1. A shorthand of doing this is this. So initial level plus plus. So this line of code can be converted into this short line of code, that is initial level plus plus. Okay, this is increment operator, by the way. If I save this, we get 1. But here is a catch. See, let var and let can be mutated. We changed the value later in our program. But if you have a variable called as a const, if you have created a variable using the const variable, const keyword to be exact, for example I can say what maybe new score, or maybe health bar. Currently the health bar is 50%. Console.log health bar 50%. But if somehow the player wins something that can be used to increase their health bar, here if you say health bar plus plus, then there will be an error, assignment to constant error. If I save this, you see we get assignment to constant variable. So a variable created using the const keyword cannot be mutated in the future. So this is the difference between var, let and const. But this is not the only difference between var, let and const. We also have a little bit more difference, like we have the difference of scoping, hoisting. So far we just have understood the difference of mutability. So var and let can be updated and mutated, but const cannot be mutated. You cannot update the value of const. Const in mathematical terms also means constant. So a very good example will be the value of pi. It always remains 14156. I guess I'm correct. So the value of pi is never going to change. No matter what you do, the value of pi will always remain something similar to this. Again, I'm telling you, I don't exactly remember the value of pi, but this would be somewhere closer to this one. Okay, pardon me if this is not correct, but I'm just trying to explain you. So the value of pi will always remain this in mathematical terms. You cannot actually update this. So if you try to do this pi equals to now this is, then again you are going to get assignment to constant variable. See, you get assignment to constant variable. The error is coming from this line, so if I comment both of these, you'll still get error. You see, now the error is from this line 59. So pi is this one. Okay, so you cannot update the variable declared using the const variable. Now you can ask me that, okay, I understood. So var, let and const, One difference is mutability. Mutability. What's the next difference? So the next difference is scoping. Scoping, and then another one is how hoisting works in JavaScript. So let's not talk about scoping, and then we'll talk about hoisting. So one difference is of mutability. Another difference is with respect to scoping. In JavaScript, scoping determines where variables, functions, and objects are accessible in your code. So there are two main types of scope. One is, should I write the comment? Yes. One is global scope, and then we have the local scope. In local scope, we again have two types. One is function scope, and then we have the block scope. Let's discuss about all of this one by one. So a very simple example of global scope is this one. So a global scope is a variable declared outside of any function or block. Okay, very simple. Variables declared outside of any function or block are always in global scope. So if you have something that is declared in global scope, they can be accessed from anywhere in the code. So a very simple example is here. Let me explain it in very simplest form. See, on line 66 we have a global var that is declared using the let keyword. I am global because this line is not inside any function or any block. So this line is sitting independently on its own. So it does not matter how nested you go, you can always access this global variable. So when you say console.log global variable, you will get the output. So here when I call the function, we will get this output from this function. And so we can access this global variable right here as well. So if I save this, see, we get I am global, I am global. So even if I create another function inside this function, I'll say function inside, okay, and if I call inside, and if I create another function here inside 2, no matter how deep you go inside 2, you can always access this global var. Okay, global var, come on, I need to copy this again, global var. Okay, if I save this, see, I'm global var. Okay, maybe I can create this string. I can say $template string just to explain you. I will say I am inside to function. See, I am inside the inside to function. I am global. Okay, so this line is coming. So this data is even accessible inside of these nested functions. Okay, hence global scope has all the codes that can be accessed from anywhere inside this label1.js file. And then we have the local scope. So variables declared inside a function or block are in the local scope. And in local scope, we have two types. One is function scope, and then we have the block scope. A very simple example of function scope is this one. We have a function. Inside this function, we have a variable called as local var. Now this local var is only going to be accessible inside this function. So here it is accessible, so there will be no problem. But the moment you try to access this local variable outside of this function, then it will result into a reference error. If I save this, you see we get a reference error, local var is not defined. Why? Because this local var is in this function. So this is function scoped. So this variable is function scoped, so you cannot access this variable outside of this function. But if I comment this code, then you will see that now we no longer have any error. So it is now saying that I am local. Okay, so this is function scope. And then we also have again a newly nested scope, that is a block scope. So a very simple example of a block scope is this one. So if you have a block, so this if is a block. Okay, a very simple block. So if you have a block, if you say let block var, I am a block scope. If you try to access this block var keyword right here, this is accessible right here. But the moment you try to access this variable outside of this block, again this will result into an error. If I save this, you see I get an error. So pretty simple. Function scope, things declared inside this function will only be accessible inside this function. Local scope is block scope is also pretty similar. Things declared within a block can only be accessible inside a block. It cannot be accessible outside of the block. Okay, so always remember about this blocking. Now this scoping thing. Now how does var, let, and const works with respect to scope? So key points about scoping is Variables declared using the var keyword, they are function scoped, which means that if you declare a variable using var keyword, then it will be accessible throughout the function. So if you have a function I'll say lol, very simple function. I don't know why I keep creating function names like this, but if I say if true, see, this is a very simple function. Inside this function we have a block. If I say var x equals to 10, I can access this x. See, we get, come on, I need to comment some of the code. Block var is creating error, so comment this. See, what happened? Well, I need to call this lol function. See, I get this output of 10, right? And if I try to access this x outside of this if block, I will still get the value of x. I get 10. Okay, so this I just talked about this thing here. Just told you that local scope is somewhere where if you have to see in this local scope, when we created this block var, then this is accessible only inside this block. But a variable declared using the var keyword, even if it is inside a block, but if it is inside a function and if it is inside a block, then if it is created using the var keyword, again this can be confusing. Okay, have patience and try to understand this. So if variable declared using var keyword, even if it is inside a block, it is still accessible outside of that block if it is created using the var keyword. See, var x is 10 inside this block is accessible, but it is accessible right here as well. Okay, so this is local scope, this is function scope, but a variable declared using the var keyword is accessible here and here as well. That's why we are getting the output of 10. But if you try to do the same thing with let, then no, error, reference error, x is not defined. Same will happen with const, x is not defined. Okay, so yes, this is the difference between var, let and const with respect to a scope. So let me write this comment. So come on, var is function scoped and let and const are block scoped. So if you have a variable using let, if you have a variable declared using let and const, then it is not going to be accessible outside of the declared block. It is only going to be usable the moment or the location where it is created. Now there's a time, it's time to test something. If I say function 1, okay, very simple, 1, I'm going to call 1. If I create a variable called as let inside equals to lol, I am inside, and if I have a function inside 1, so this function is inside 1. If I quickly call it inside 1, and if I try to access this inside variable right here, we can totally do this. Okay, if you have a children gets access to every data of their parent. So if this is the parent, let me change the name to parent, and then this child will get access like this. Okay. Child will get access to data that the parent has. Okay, so yeah, even if you go multiple level down, I'll say grand child is my sign, access your grand's property. See, you again get lol, I'm inside. Okay, so scoping always works from top to bottom. Okay, if the data is with the parents, the children can certainly access it, but it does not work vice versa. So if your grandchildren has something, for example, if it has a chocolate equals to dairy milk, you cannot access the chocolate of your kid. So parents cannot have access to the kid's chocolate. I don't know why, but this is just a very simple illiterate example maybe, but it will create a reference error. So yeah, if you are a parent, your kids will always have access to certain things, but if your kid has something, then it will be a nightmare for you to access those things, especially if it is some sweet item, maybe chocolate or chocolate. So yeah, now you get a reference error, chocolate is not defined. Next up is hoisting. So hoisting is fairly a very simple mechanism. In hoisting, what happens is that a certain data is accessible even before it is declared. Okay, so if you declare a variable called as a equals to 10, then somehow you can access this variable a even before it is declared. So a is declared on line 122, then you can access it on line 121. See, the output will be undefined. We are getting an error, so we are getting error from this line. So let me comment this entire code. Okay, now you see that we get undefined. See, we are not getting an error. See, you can ask me that in other programming languages like Java or Python, if you try to do this, you will get an error. Why? Because you have declared a variable on line 122, and hey, you are trying to access that on 121. It doesn't make sense. But in JavaScript, you can do this because somehow using hoisting, the definition is moved to the top of the scope chain, that is the global scope. Okay, so now at global scope, the value of this a is undefined. Okay, if you access it right here, you will get the output, but if you try to access a even before it is declared, it will give you undefined. So variable created using the var keyword, they are hoisted, but they are hoisted to undefined. But if you try to do the same thing with the let keyword, then it will give you reference error, because variables created using the let keyword as well as the const keyword, they are not hoisted. It will bring you a reference error. So this is the difference between var, let and const, and why does var behave differently than let and const. Okay, now I'm going to give you some definitions with which you can actually proceed forward. So if someone asks you what is hoisting, then just tell them that hoisting is a JavaScript behavior where variable and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope during the compilation phase, even before the code is executed. So that is how actually JavaScript executes code. However, the way hoisting works differs between var, let and const. So variables declared using the var keyword, they are hoisted, but they are hoisted to undefined. Variables declared using let and const, they are not at all hoisted, so it will result into a reference error. Okay, so always remember this. So I think this is a very simple example. Now I want to show you one graph. Let me quickly show you. First of all, I will have to take a screenshot of this, and so it is here. Okay, so key difference in hoisting. So keyword var, function global, hoisted, yes, it is hoisted, but it is hoisted to undefined. Don't bother about temporal dead zone as of now. Probably we'll try to discuss it later down the line. But let scope is block scope, const is block scope. See, that's why all of this works simultaneously. Blocking, scoping, hoisting, all of this is interconnected words. That's why I'm talking about all of them all at once. So initialized during hoisting, no. So a variable declared using let keyword, they are not hoisted, and not even variables declared using the const keyword, they are also not hoisted. Variables declared using the var keyword, only these are hoisted. Okay, now always remember that never use var to declare your variable, because it somehow brings unexpected result. So always use let and const. Let if you have the use cases of updating the data of variable later down the line, use let. And if you are certain that the data does not need to be mutated, then use const. Okay, so always stick to let and const. Var is an old school thing, skip var. Do understand how var works. If someone asks you how var works, what is difference between var, let and const, just explain them, but please avoid using var to declare variables.